それではお時間となりましたので始めさせていただきます。まず11時からのこちらの講演は、クリス・ルーシアンさんからの DevOps& モビング、モブプロを始めさせていただきます。それではクリスさん、よろしくお願いします。
ありがとうございます。Hi, I'm Chris Lucian, and joined with me here is Austin Chadwick. We're presenting together today, and this is going to be a discussion on DevOps and mob programming, or mobbing in general. And welcome to our talk.
Yeah, so this next slide, before we share about ourselves, we're going to share a couple concepts, and one of them is why experiment with DevOps mob programming. And for me, it's really about all these qualities you see on the screen. So before I was mob programming, I thought I was doing pretty well with software engineering, but once I tried out mob programming, it just all these things accelerated. So continuous delivery, so delivering to production often and continuously. Development joy, just lots of happiness and fun. High quality code. The code quality was much higher, much easier to read and understand. The bugs dropped very low and defects. And so those are several reasons, at least for me, why I've grown to share about mob programming, just because of the good qualities it's brought.
All right, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the processes that we follow. And so forgive me if the translation didn't come through exactly, but I wanted, because there's so much on this slide, I just wanted to make sure that we talked about it a little bit. Things like the practices that we have. So this idea of scouting, or what that entails, is incrementally improving things and not just doing giant projects, and keeping things lean, and having a delivery pipeline, and very importantly, feedback sources and things along those lines. So we do things like unit testing, integration testing, automated security testing, and these practices essentially are built in. And very similarly to that, we also have a core development process that follows something similar. And so you can kind of see here that for all code, we follow a very strict habit or strict process. And we go in and we make sure that the code is tested, that we clean the code as we go, we refactor, and a number of other practices in that. And you can see that here. And a lot of it is automated quality built in. And that also has kind of come from incremental practices, as you'll see through the rest of the talk.
Yeah, so one thing about DevOps is it's really that excellent idea of the different specialties like development, ops, quality, security, all coming to work together. But throughout my career, I've seen that it's been hard to make that happen. So the first picture on the left is of silos, people separated completely from each other. And so it was really hard to integrate and build quality in from all the different mindsets. And then later in my career, I joined a company where we were on the same team. But as you can see, when you're on the same team, there's still cubicle walls, and we're still working in isolation a lot of the time. And then something that an ops person might see about what I'm doing wouldn't notice till later. And so it's just basically this slide shows the problem of how can we really integrate dev and ops and security and all these great things when there's all these separations and barriers between us.
And another piece of that, and I think what Austin is talking about there, is this idea of flow efficiency versus resource efficiency. When you're working separately, you can be very resource efficient. And an example is this talk, the TED talk that's here. They use an example of the throughput of a single patient in a diagnosis. And seeing a specialist in a doctor situation when you see a specialist, you can fully utilize that specialist, but you have to make appointments months in advance because so many people need to see them. However, when you use a flow efficiency approach, then you might have a number of doctors that are not necessarily always fully utilized, but a single patient can be diagnosed very quickly. And so the throughput of single patients is very high. And so that's the concept of resource efficiency versus flow efficiency. And one could argue that this all can be applied to code.
Yeah, and so one great way to get started with that is if you're familiar with lean concepts and value streams maps, it really applies well to DevOps. And so no matter where you're at, you can always do a value stream map. And then this picture here is several of our teams who did it. And it kind of takes a look at any work item from conception to development to delivery. What are the things that need to be done? And then also, what's the wait times between each step? And if you're in an organization or culture where it's very resource intense, people are very busy, but there's a lot of wait and there's a lot of waste and wait time between each of the things, which increases the time before an item goes from conception to all the way to delivered to production for customers for feedback. And so a value stream map is a great way to get a picture of where you're at and analyze it and maybe figure out the next step.
So we should introduce ourselves a little bit more and talk a little bit about our histories. And so I'm Chris Lucian. I've been mob programming for about 10 years now, actually. I started as a software developer at Hunter Industries, and while there, which is an irrigation company, and while there, we had a project that was really important. And it was coming up on a deadline, and the deadline seemed impossible to meet for this one developer. That developer asked for help, and we started working together on the same computer. And what happened was mob programming began to be utilized. Essentially, we didn't have a name for it back then, but we began to mob program. And that resulted in kind of this practice that we now use through retrospectives. And so before that, I had done things like environmental chemistry programming and cardboard box manufacturing company programming and things like that. But I never worked together with people in the same way. And so maybe Austin, you can talk too.
Yeah, and I think my career is almost many years in each type of way of doing software development. So my first several years were with Waterfall, a very traditional organization. I was a business analyst, very siloed. And then my next transition was to a role where we adopted Scrum, and I was a Scrum master, as a tester, as a developer. And there is where we started to experiment with extreme programming, pair programming, and then mob programming. And then we visited where Chris is, and where I am now, and learned about mobbing. And I started to just love it. And it was so fantastic that I want to do more of it. And so now I've been able to do it full time. And so I'm very excited to share about this with you all today.
All right. And so, kind of speaking about just sharing, this is the just sharing concept that we have here is an important one. I think that one piece of this that we focus on a lot is that we're not telling you to do this. We're not recommending this to you, that you start this right away. But this is something that we do in our development environments, and so we're sharing that this is possible, and no one's necessarily required to do it. It's just that something that it's there and you might try it.
Yeah, and this slide is about no practice envy. So what we'll be sharing with today came about through probably 1,000 iterations and retrospectives, micro retrospectives, and 1,000 adjustments over time. And so it might seem like a lot, it might seem overwhelming, but the whole idea is to start where you're at, kind of the heart of Agile: experiment, inspect, adapt, and repeat. And you probably won't land immediately to be like someone else who's maybe having excellent results, but it's a great way to start and just start improving little by little and keep turning up the good.
One thing that I like to talk about too, because I want to argue for making sure that people are experimenting, and so the danger of complacency is really important to talk about, because if you're not experimenting and trying new things in general, then you are likely as an organization to get stuck in the same routine. And that routine of doing the same thing over and over again will allow your competitors to outpace you in innovation, especially. And so continuous experimentation, continuous improvement is extremely important concept to be focused on, especially throughout this talk, because a lot of it is important as you move forward, regardless of what you do, mobbing or any other practice.
Yeah, and so we're going to be hitting a couple more cultural or continuous improvement concepts before we talk about mobbing directly. And another one is the virtuous loop, because this is how mobbing was discovered and how it's grown since then. And it has a couple key pieces. So one is retrospectives, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. But if you just have retrospectives and you don't have learning, what can happen, and I've been in teams like this in the past, is the same items or problems keep coming up again, and we don't have ways to solve them because we haven't invested in ways to learn and do better. So we've combined continuous retrospectives with dedicated learning time, where we have dedicated time each day to learn and innovate and figure out better ways to do things. And those two things fuel each other and make this virtuous loop. And it's also fueled by an overall view of extreme ownership, where the team that is working owns the process, and they have the ability to run experiments, make changes, and see how it goes. And when that team has ownership, they really, it's natural for them to strive to make it better. And so these three things working together really has had fantastic results for us.
Another thing is turning up the good or increasing the good. The idea here is something that Woody Zuhl would always talk about, and has always been really important. And I think just like the fun, done, learn retrospective format, which I'm a big fan of, the idea is to focus on things that are positive and to increase the positive. And in the retrospectives, I think it's really good. So a lot of the benefits that we will talk about mob DevOps in general is through this idea of let's increase the number of good things that occur and make it more likely that positive things occur. And then the tendency is that bad things will fade away as the number of good things increases. So.
Awesome. And so you take those concepts of retrospectives, turn up the good, learning, and you apply that to DevOps. And this was basically the result for me and many others, is you take down those barriers and walls that separated us and turned us into silos. And even when we're on the same team, the working individually. And so the way mob programming was discovered is that someone needed help, and then all these different disciplines and mindsets came together, and they worked together on the same computer. And now you had all those different disciplines, ops, dev, QA, security, etc., all applying the best thoughts and all going into the code and into the process at the same time. So turning up the good on what makes DevOps excellent is, in my mind, leads to mob programming.
All right, and then mob programming in general as a general concept, and again, this is kind of a blanket statement for DevOps as well. I think in this picture right here, even on the bottom left, on the right side of that picture, they are doing DevOps, while on the left side they're doing software development. And a big piece of it is that they're all the brilliant minds working on the same thing at the same time in the same space on the same computer. Now we're distributed, so the same space piece may not fit anymore, but the core concept is there. We're all working together on the same computer at the same time, and it works very well. And the amount of collaboration that exists there is very high in that sense.
So what many people think of when they think of mob programming is this anti-pattern that we call the driver and the watchers. And it's basically like, well, what's the point of one person typing on the keyboard quietly and 3 to 5 other people just watching? And humorously in this picture, it seems very intimidating for a crowd like this to be watching you while you code quietly. And so that's a common misconception of mob programming, because mob programming done in a healthy way, it looks much, much different, which we'll talk about in the next slides.
All right, and so mobbing roles, again, I apologize for any translations that didn't come through properly. In the text here. So these are all examples of roles that people doing mob DevOps or mob programming in general would take on, and we'll go through these as we go through the talk. And so a good place to see this is Willem Larsen's GitHub, which is the URL is at the bottom there. And it's the Mob Programming RPG. So if you want to see these slides again, it's very easily accessible there.
Yeah, so before we jump into the different roles that people take on while mob programming, whether formally or informally, they take on these different roles to contribute to the code or the thing we're working on at the time, is a tool. A mob timer often helps many mobs. It's not mandatory to do mob programming, but it's great for, especially when you're starting out. And basically you put all the different names into the tool. And then what it does is at every so often, so like you can set it for 5 minutes, it will turn the screen black and tell you time to switch. So whoever will now be at the keyboard will switch and become the driver, and then other people will switch to the other roles. And that helps people stay engaged, because if you're away from the keyboard too long, you might, not be focused. And it also is just a good flow to help the team and everyone collaborate.
And another really important piece of this is Kanban. The way that we organize the work is through a pull system. And again, these are all lean systems that we're doing. And so we want to eliminate waste. And in eliminating waste, in order to provide full flow efficiency, we're using Kanban as the process for pulling the next most important thing to do. And so, in DevOps, if you would follow that process from the very beginning, you might have a Kanban that lays out all the different items that you need going forward.
Yeah, so jumping into the first role for mob programming is the driver. And this is the person at the keyboard and taking the ideas of the navigator of the mob and putting them into the code. Here, if you're playing the mob programming RPG game, here's some things you would do to level up, so to speak, in the game. But they're great to do when you're mob programming in general, is to ask a clarifying question about what to type. Type something that even you disagree with. So if the mob or the navigator is telling you to do something that maybe you don't want to do, you still do it because you can run the experiment and see how it goes. And your role at the time is to drive and control the keyboard. Use a new keyboard shortcut and show the mob as you're doing it, and learn something new about the tooling. And if you're doing a particular form of mob programming where there's only one person navigating and telling the driver what to do, you ignore instructions from other people other than the navigator. And yeah, it's a great role. And for me, when I first started mobbing, I learned so much through being the driver.
Another role that you might participate in is the navigator. And the navigator is essentially the one that is actually moving the code forward. You might think that the driver is moving the code forward, but they're more or less the smart input device The navigator is the one who's going to be asking for ideas, filtering the mob's ideas, and then telling the driver exactly what to do or type. To tell the driver only the high-level intent and have them implement the details. And so in a DevOps context, that might be go ahead and create a new pipeline, and then the driver would then go and create the new pipeline. To tell the driver, create a failing test and make it pass, and then refactor. So this is more of it on the the development side, but you also have create a simple pipeline and then make it run and show that it runs all the way through and can fail and properly fails.
Yeah, and so kind of the default role, if you're not the driver or the navigator or some of these other roles we're going to share about in a little bit, we just call it the mobber. And it's basically the person who is in the team, in the group. And there are several things you can do in this. And one important one is basically just to listen on the edge of your seat and just really be engaged and pay attention. And if you see something and say something, so you can say, contribute an idea to the navigator and say, hey, navigator, I feel like on line 10 of this pipeline script, I see an issue and I think there might be a problem there. And you can talk to the navigator and contribute an idea. You can ask questions to help the team learn or help yourself learn. And also you can yield to the least privileged voice and make sure that you're not speaking too much and giving room for others to contribute ideas and ask questions as well.
And so this is a story of essentially putting mobile apps into the Fastlane. So Fastlane is a tool for deploying mobile applications, so iPhone and Android applications, and it's a tool for automating the process. And the team was essentially through the combination of learning and implementing, they were able to take hundreds of steps and automate them using Fastlane, and hundreds of manual steps. And these manual steps had many opportunities for error in them, and having a large checklist to go through and things along those lines. And so what this did was made it so that those hundreds of steps, which used to take a very long time, would now happen automatically and without anybody thinking about it. And what that did is it gave those people their time back. And I think that's a really important concept through automation in general, is finding opportunities to learn new automation techniques. And in mob DevOps, the mob learned piece by piece. So one person learned Fastlane, another person learned deployments on Android, another person learned deployments on iOS, and that information all synthesized together while they were all working together. And everybody had little pieces of the puzzle to move it forward. And that caused them to come up with this great solution. And it would have been very difficult to get there had each person been alone working in a silo. In fact, most organizations probably do not automate as much as they could be because different experts work in different silos or work alone.
Yeah, so kind of jumping back to the different roles that people can take on while mob programming. An awesome one is the researcher. And so as you can kind of see here in this picture off to the left, it's like the driver and the navigator talking through the problem and maybe running an experiment. And the person off to the right is flipped up their laptop for mob programming in person, or if you're doing it remotely, you can pull it up on your own computer and you can research the problem. So even though you're not running the experiment directly, you are researching ways other people have solved the problem, either on the internet or looking through documentation or blog posts. And then you take that learning and you bring it back to the mob. And I've seen this happen several times with DevOps, where someone's really excellent at researching how to interact with a particular cloud infrastructure. And the team is struggling and they research it and bring it right then and there when the team needs it to how to solve the problem.
The next role is the sponsor, and this role is an interesting one because I think not very many people think about it, but it's this idea that now that you're in a group, you can actually watch out for things that like either people being ignored unintentionally or something along those lines. And this kind of goes with the piece on respect and kindness and things. And so one thing that a sponsor may do is amplify the unheard voice. So maybe two people are talking to each other and the third person has a good idea. The sponsor may say, hey, why don't we take a moment to listen to this other idea? And then also, you know, finding the person with least privilege in the mob and supporting their contributions, and also celebrating moments of excellence. And so, you know, hey, we did it, yatta, right? Then we know that we can celebrate those things. And I think in the day-to-day work, we don't celebrate often enough. And so it's really important to make sure that as a team that everybody's, you know, really excited and happy about things that they accomplish.
Yeah, another role you can try out is if you feel like you're navigating too much and you're the one always kind of leading the team on where to go next and what to try next, and is you can help someone else learn to navigate with the mob. And so what you can do is either through chat, or, you know, if you're mobbing in person, you can tell them quietly and help guide the navigator to navigate the driver. So basically you're helping someone else learn how to navigate well by hinting or giving them cues to the next step to navigate. And I think I'll take this one as well, Chris. So this is another story related to DevOps and mob programming, is that I was on a team and we were writing infrastructure as code to basically automate the pipeline process of taking code that was developed and automate the tests, and then automate the infrastructure being deployed to the cloud, and then automate it being deployed to customers. And a more DevOps focused engineer happened to be walking by our mob and realized what we were doing. And in his dedicated learning time, he'd been trying out a different tool that basically automates the creation of infrastructure as code for the cloud. And so he's like, oh, do you mind if I join your mob for the bear? I'm like, oh yeah, great. And so within a matter of minutes, we had tried out this tool and had deployed several cloud resources, and it was all working. And it took several days for one of our developers to believe that it even worked. It was so fantastic. And it's some of those things that happen when you're mobbing, where those ideas combine to really have a fantastic result like this.
Another key thing, and I think this is especially important in DevOps, is the nose. And so the nose is this idea that you're looking for code smells or pipeline smells, right? So if your integration pipeline, your continuous integration, continuous delivery pipeline smells bad, you know, and we're saying that metaphorically, if it smells bad, then then you might want to refactor it and you might want to improve it. And you know, manual steps, for example, are considered a bad smell for a deployment pipeline. And so in here, it says, you know, point out a long line of code, or maybe an overly complex pipeline. Point out a complex conditional that might be, you know, too many resources in a pipeline, things like that. Duplication, maybe duplication of pipelines. I've seen quite a bit of that in the past. Point out unnamed variables and or unnamed deployment environments, or unnamed you know, subsystems in a larger system, and propose an action for deodorizing the DevOps or the code. And so there are many examples where this is you know, if there's somebody there with you that remembers to point out when something smells bad, then the team together is more likely to fix it than if somebody is alone and ready to move on.
Yeah, another great role is the archivist, because when multiple people are working together, it's easy to be not on the same page, and not thinking well together, and be confused about what are we working on, or what's the problem. And so what the archivist does is it If you're in person, goes to a whiteboard and starts drawing the ideas or drawing the architecture of the diagram. If you're remote, you can open up a tool like draw.io and start whiteboarding with the team to help understand, hey, here's where we are, here's the current problem, here's some potential solutions, what do we want to do next, and just really help everyone clarify what they're thinking abstractly in their head and make it concrete and visible. And I've seen this so many times help a team understand a pipeline that feels ethereal, hard to understand, and they can visualize it and then decide what to do next.
The traffic cop is a newer role in the whole thing, and so this is the idea that if so you're mobbing together and there's a traffic cop person in the mob, they might suggest a new relevant process for a working agreement. They might point out when the team violates a process or working agreement. They might articulate the current task at hand and make it visible to the entire mob. This might be putting it up on a board or whiteboard or something, or tracking it on a Kanban board online, things like that. And then also capturing design decisions and other technical details for the team. So this might be an online drawing, or it might a shared drawing of some kind. This might be a hand drawing that they take a picture of and send it to the rest of the team.
Yeah, and then this one is the Automationist. We've been talking a lot about it with DevOps, and it's basically I really appreciate an Automationist in the mob, because sometimes I will feel fine doing a repetitive task, or I may not even know about a way to automate a piece of deployment or a piece of how we deliver value to a customer. And when there's an Automationist on the mob, they're always trying to think of ways where we can automate what we're doing manually. And the more and more you do that, the more value is amplified, and you free up time to do important things, which is crucial for DevOps.
And so this is another story, another example of the benefit of mobbing. The team had a new associate level or junior level developer that joined the mob. And the mob was working on DevOps related tasks, and some people were developers, others had more interest in DevOps, others had less interest in DevOps. But there were a few kind of magical things that happened with this developer. So one thing is that he was able to get up to speed very, very quickly on what he didn't know, because quickly he saw the things that were being navigated and worked through. And then also what the team could learn, and so he can kind of look ahead and learn in a direction that the rest of the team might not have been otherwise. And so he was able to develop new skills that he could combine with the rest of the team's existing skills to improve the DevOps overall across the whole team. And gradually over time, that combination of learning and retrospecting led to a more and more automated pipeline. And so that, that particular team saw movement from deployments that took multiple days to deployments that took only hours, and getting multiple things out in the same day.
All right, we're going to switch gears a bit. So we covered some of the mob programming roles. And so this next one is kind of an analogy for a mob, in that, maybe if, a person working solo might be a bike or a fast car, and it goes fast and it's busy, but then it crashes, where maybe a mob in the long run, the mid-long run, is faster than the bike, let's say, because it's like a steamroller. It's something that flattens the road and nothing can stop it, because it just keeps moving. The code keeps moving. Everyone who needs to be there is there. Every problem is solved because you have DevOps, security, and QA there, all to solve whatever problem comes to hand. And in our experience, because you're building quality in and doing things right the first time, it just keeps steamrolling and is very effective compared to working independently.
And just one other thing that, kind of going back to the idea that you don't want to be complacent. Emergencies lead to change. So as you can see here, this is some of our remote working environments. And obviously with the pandemic, we are now all remote and remote mobbing. And there have been a number of great tools that have emerged for us to be able to make this work both, in person and remote, and the sense of community and the sense of progress and the ability to move forward quickly, as well as the social aspects of mobbing, remain even online.
Yeah, and one foundational thing for mob programming is, now that we're working together continuously all the time, or at least often if you mob program a lot, is we really have to treat each other well. So what we discovered mob programming is that kindness, consideration, respect are absolutely essential, because it leads to development joy, where we really have a great time mobbing, but it also is really effective for sharing ideas and giving each other feedback. And if it doesn't have kindness, consideration, respect, can lead to many problems, especially while you're mob programming.
And then here's another one on psychological safety. This refers to Amy Edmondson's work on psychological safety. This basically means that anybody on the team should be able to give each other technical or interpersonal feedback without fearing retaliation. And so somebody who feels psychologically safe does not feel psychologically fearful.
Yeah, and so one other thing to keep in mind while mob programming with DevOps is the Satir change model. And what this really talks about is any new change or new thing, or someone switches mobs or switches teams, introduces something kind of foreign to the team and causes a dip in chaos. And then there's a transforming idea where the team through retrospectives learns how to adapt to the change, and then they integrate well, and it develops a new status quo where we perform at a higher level. And it's important to keep the Satir change model in mind, because you don't want to introduce too many changes at once, and then your dip will be far too low to recover. And it's just something to keep in mind, especially with people mob programming and working together all the time, and with many experiments and retrospectives happening.
And then kind of another thing that we can talk about here is transparency, metrics, and consistency. This is the idea that we want to be transparent, especially in DevOps. We want to take a lot of metrics around things that are going well and going poorly, just in general numeric values, and optimize to the value stream and be consistent about that. And we can probably begin to take questions here soon.
Yeah. Do you want to cover this one too, Chris?
Yeah, it's a diffusion of innovation. So I think some of you may recognize that picture. But this idea that all these ideas kind of spread naturally, and there will be early adopters, early majority, late majority, and laggards in the different categories. And so there might be early adopters in an organization, early adopters across the world. And then as an idea spreads throughout the world, then more and more people might do it. And so, this picture is from mob programming training in Japan. And it's really nice to see that diffusion of innovation happens, and just to know that if a small portion of a company is doing the diffusion of innovation, then it's important to understand that not everybody's going to adopt it right away, but it will grow if you nurture it.
Yeah, and this one's about learning as a competitive advantage. So basically, as we talked about at the beginning, having that dedicated learning time to really help people grow and learn. And also mob programming is just learning all the time. So as you can see here in this mob, you have a security specialist, someone more DevOps, and someone more development focused. And just the three working together in a mob, the learning is just happening all the time. And so basically, if you're not learning and innovating and growing, your competitors will. And so mobbing is a great way to amplify that learning to really give you competitive advantage.
Okay, I'm going to skip to the end, but I just wanted to ask the audience if there are any questions right now.
Well, while the questions are coming in, what we have up on this slide is Chris and I's podcast, video cast, and social media accounts for the Mob Mentality Show, where we have people from all around the world, including Japan and several other places, who have been experimenting and doing mob programming and sharing their experiences. And we share about tools and several concepts related to mob programming. And it's been a ton of fun to share that.
Ah, こんにちは。今、質問してもよろしいでしょうか。はい、川口です。こんにちは。
こんにちは。
こんにちは。私、2019年、2年前にちょうど、ハンターにしばらくお邪魔をして、見てたんですけど、一緒にモブに入って一緒にやらせていただいたんですけど、そのと、はい。ごめんなさい。今、シリがなんか喋ってる。ごめんなさい。で、それからコロナが来て2年経って、リモートになったと思うんですけど、一番大きく変わったところっていうか、苦労したところとかっていうのを教えてもらってもよろしいでしょうか。います。じゃあ。Chris, could you set the turn in the Zoom menu, interpretation menu, set the English?
I don't see how to do that.
Okay. Okay. I'll ask again in English.
Okay.
So I've been visited the Hunter in 2 years ago. I stayed at your office there several weeks. After that, the 2 years after now, now is 2 years after, and with Corona virus, what's the biggest difference from that time? What's the biggest challenge for you?
Yeah, well, so transitioning to remote, I think, was very interesting. We did a number of new, we involved a number of new tools, and just finding out different ways to do remote mobbing. And so, being able to see everybody on the screen, and I think it was interesting because even here, we had product owners that may come up to work with the team, and we thought maybe this would be a bad thing that we were all remote, but instead rather than people going from meeting to meeting and having walking time between the meeting and not being able to talk to them as much, we had immediate access to our product owners. So there was some really good events that happened because we were able to communicate faster with each other. And so some of the challenges actually got us to think about ways to do things better. And so I'd say that a lot of our product ownership communication led to 2 major things. One was so overall our DevOps are going really well, and so one was cross-functional lean coffees. So this idea of doing a lean coffee discussion cross-functionally, so that with equal representation from each of the groups, has been really beneficial to helping with communication across functions. And then also the ability to instantly work together without the stigma of maybe walking up to a group of people and interrupting them that may have existed in the past.
Yeah, and one other thing I'll add on to that is when you visited Yes/No, you could walk to the different mobs and see what everyone was doing.
Yeah.
And so to do that remotely, we figured out a way through Teams where you could have up on the left all the different mobs, and you can click and see who's in each mob and then go join that mob. And so virtually walking around the room and joining different mobs we were able to do that remotely, and it's been quite fantastic. So instantaneously, a product owner could join us, or a embedded engineer could join us, or I could switch over to another mob to help them. Just like we walked around in the building,
Wow.
we now do remotely.
Is this your custom tool you made, or some kind of the production product?
It was
in the market?
Microsoft Teams lets us do that, and so you can have a video chat in a channel, and then immediately go to that channel. We've seen other mobbing teams do this through a Google Doc, a Google spreadsheet, where they have individual Zoom links for the day where those mobs are. So it's similar. The nice thing about Microsoft Teams is it shows you all the people currently in that mob. And so it's very analogous to at a glance, you can see who is where, and you can go join them and see maybe who is talking to who at the time without having to intervene in their discussion.
Wow, thank you so much. Nice, good information. Yeah, I will try. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, Chris, could you turn off your screen sharing?
Yes.
Then you can you can see the interpretation mode, I think.
Yes, I've never seen that before. English, okay. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. はい、今、クリスさんの方で、通訳設定してもらいましたのに。
Yes, I can hear the translation now. Thank you. Was it?
聞こえてます。大丈夫です。どうぞ。
質問してもよろしいですか？
Yes.
どうぞどうぞ。
Yes.
はい。お久しぶりです。私も2019年に、ハンターに、伺っていました。西郷の長です。一つすごくお聞きしたいのは、最後に、クリスさんが言ったオープンにする、DevOps というところでオープンにする、モブのこういう活動によってオープンにして、やるところのメトリックスとか、そのモニタリングのところの工夫みたいなところっていうのは、どういうことをやられてるのかなっていうことをお聞きしたいです。
Yeah, Austin, do you want to talk about metrics that we use from day to day, or would you like me to go?
Sure. So I know some of the main ones are defects. So bugs. We always want to keep that near zero. And so that is something we monitor and watch closely. And we always try to reduce the amount of bugs to zero, because bugs are cumulative. When there are more bugs, they build on top of each other, and they're psychological. And so we always try to keep that very near zero. And often with mobbing, that is less difficult. The other is release frequency. So how often are we delivering to production? The lofty goal is daily. And those are two to come to mind that are more clear number type metrics. And also a more softer qualitative type one is equality of navigation. So whenever you're in a mob, you're always trying to keep it equal, the amount of people who are talking and navigating and mobbing. And so Chris, is there any you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think one thing that we also do is we measure happiness on a regular cadence. And so, how happy is everyone on the team? And so we say over the last 6 months, draw a line for how happy you've been. And you can include things personal or just work related, but it gives us a good way to talk to each other about things that may be, either something making you chronically unhappy with the work, or maybe something personal that is affecting your work negatively. And so, it's interesting because you might not think it's something that you can make numeric, but what we do is we have everybody draw their happiness over time, and then we layer that on top of each other for multiple people, and you can see the happiness, the cumulative happiness of the team, as well as other things like that. So I think that, you know, and then we also check in with the product owners from time to time to make sure that they're happy.
ありがとうございます。
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, and you know, please visit our YouTube channel and see some of the other discussions that we have with people all around the world. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. It's been fantastic and fun.
And thank you for having us.
Yes.
Thank you, Chris-san. Austin-san, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's great to see familiar faces again. It's fun.
I also, yeah, me too.
はい、それでは、この時間での、講演は終了となります。皆様ありがとうございました。一度この後、お昼休憩を挟みまして、次の講演はですね、13時から開始いたしますので、よろしくお願いいたします。またですね、会場にいらっしゃる方だけのお話になってしまいますが、ホワイエの方にお弁当がありますので、お選びいただければと思います。それではお昼休憩入らせていただきます。Chris, Austin, thank you very much. We will close the session.